Horizon Treatment Services, inspiring hope and healing since 1976.
So I'd like to welcome everybody here today. This is a conversation about NIATx and the framework for continuous improvement at organizations, particularly with behavioral health. I have with me Matt Russo from NIATx, Jamie Campos, CEO of Horizon Services, and Gina Suppresso, the Associate Director of Compliance and Outcomes. Today, we're going to have a conversation, learn about what NIATx is, and I'm going to turn to you for that, Matt. If you could just sort of tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you help organizations like ours.
Sure. I'm a consultant who does a lot of work in quality improvement and in evidence-based practice implementation, and much of that is rooted in the NIATx model. I've been involved with that since its inception in 2003. And NIATx comes from a history of quality improvement that emerged in industry and manufacturing in the 50s, post-World War II era, where assembly lines and different kinds of manufacturing plants were working to create more efficiencies in their process. And so they started to develop process improvements. People have heard about Lean, Six Sigma models, which come from those industrial models. Then there was a move to try to develop some similar tools for healthcare. So hospitals started to use a lot of those models. And then in, as I said, 2003, this model NIATx was developed specifically for substance use services. Since then, it has evolved and is now working across the human services spectrum. And it's designed specifically for environments that need quality improvement, but also need a model that's easy to engage with, it's easy to learn and understand, and then to implement in an array of different human service environments.
So I think my first question, this might answer itself, but Matt, if you could just tell me, what are some of the biggest distinctions between the way that the process improvement formula was set up for like manufacturing versus how it needed to be adjusted for the behavioral health atmosphere?
Yeah, the biggest difference is that in the human service environments and behavioral health, it's all relationship based, right? The work is relationships. There are some processes that are not relationship based, but most of them are. So there's all these human factors that are really primary drivers of the process. You know, if we're operating an assembly line and we make the part the way we're supposed to, and we put the parts together the way that we're supposed to, we can say, check, it worked. The world of relationship-based services are not so simple and clear. So the model has more of includes both quantitative data about specific things that we can measure, but also qualitative concerns about how people experience it. Our primary of our 5 principles, our number one principle is knowing and understanding the customer, really using some of those person-centered orientations to making sure that we maintain the relationships and maintain the experience as positive for the staff as well.
Well, I love that. I think qualitative and quantitative are critical when we're dealing with lives in particular. I'm a qualitative gal. I know Jamie is a quantitative guy. He likes the data and I like the story. I like the nuance. I want to invite Jamie, if you want to jump in and add your thoughts to this.
Yeah, one of the things that process and quality improvement bring up for me, it has to do with patient retention and engagement in treatment. And so you try hard to develop rapport with your clients and to try to deploy evidence-based practices and all of this stuff. But the processes that our clients have to go through, oftentimes we don't really know what it actually is like in their shoes to actually go through. Let's say, if you think about a Medi-Cal related intake here in California, I mean, it's sometimes an hour and a half or more process to get them through a full intake process. And all of that impacts how well engaged that client feels with that treatment program and with the professional helpers that are embedded within that program. And so it can get pretty complicated because you have all of these regulatory forces that you're grappling with and other kind of quality standards that you're trying to achieve that can sometimes impact the length of time that you're spending with the client on any given function. But what's brilliant about the NIATx framework, which pulls from other fields in terms of process improvement and efficiency and quality improvement, is that you're able to kind of simplistically kind of tease that apart in a thoughtful way that's not too overwhelming, not too daunting. And after making a series of small improvements and measuring them, whether they're effective or not, you actually have a chance of directly impacting how well engaged that client feels in the care that they're receiving. And when they feel engaged, they're retaining in that program. And then when they're retaining in the program, the chances of their outcomes over a longer period of time go up because they're maintaining that connectivity to the continuum of care overall. So those are a few of the thoughts that I have in terms of the NIATx model and how that boils down to actually impacting a client experience in the program.
Yeah, I think that can get lost sometimes is just the whole relational element of the work that we do because it's so important and CARF accredited and all of these medical protocols and clinical protocols, levels of care and symptomologies, and all of these different things can get, becomes so much a part of the conversation that we can lose the relationship between the helper and the helped. And I think that that's what's really, really important because that's what we're doing is we're helping people, right? We're helping people to get well. One of the things that I know that we put this into motion at Horizon, could you tell us a little about how we utilize the NIATx, Jerry?
A couple of years ago, we reached out to Matt and the NIATx team, learned about you guys through a training. Actually, I went through myself in Southern California. It was, I think, maybe a 2-day workshop. And, you come into a new organization and you see opportunities for improvement. And just because you see them doesn't mean that you're going to be able to affect change in that regard. There's a lot of complexity when it comes to change management and engaging the right hearts and the right minds to actually carry out a project at the program level. I reached out to the NIATx team a couple of years ago because we were going to have to systematically think about organizing our projects in the right way and prioritizing them and using the right framework. And I remember feeling so empowered as a substance use disorder counselor certified when I was able to engage in that methodology myself. And I wanted our people to feel empowered with the right tools to carry out some exciting change projects. And so we reached out to the NIATx team and we decided to systematize that. So I think we pull Matt and his team in every year for different projects. And, Gina, I think, was plugged into a number of those and implemented a couple of change projects that had some amazing results, I think.
And I would underscore the value of Horizon's orientation to NIATx. Most of the time we connect with an organization or a system, and it's often a one and done where we'll do training and we'll facilitate some work and we'll maybe do technical assistance and coaching related to some projects that are being implemented. And then we part ways and we hope that they sustain that work. But often, as we know, these things are not sustained. Jamie was pointing to some of the reasons why that's challenging. But what you've done at Horizon is to across a longer period of time to engage in several projects and to receive technical assistance and support. And then we start to see that model getting built into the culture of an organization, into your culture, where there's that kind of tissue that starts to grow across programs and managers and line staff and different programs who start to be able to use the language and really start to think about quality issues, start to think about what they're measuring and how that measurement is trending across time. And all of that really contributes to a learning organization, an organization that's focused on quality and where all the staff care about quality. One of my key indicators is when I talk to people who are in direct services and I ask them about quality improvement. In some organizations, they'll say, no, that's not me. I don't have anything to do with that. But in organizations that have some deep roots, and I'm hopeful that at Horizon, if I did this right now, I would find some people who said, oh yeah, I do some of that stuff. And we are involved with measuring things. And here's how we're improving this in our program. And that's when I know things are working well.
Well, Matt, I want to thank you for sort of lifting up that perspective from the outside, because I know that we work very hard to be a continuous improvement organization. It's sort of the heart of who we are, and what we're always trying to find opportunities for growth, right? And improvement. And so I'm so glad, Jamie, that you found NIATx, and I want to hear how we've used it. My understanding, Gina, is that you had a project that you were put in charge of. Could you tell us about what that was and how that went?
Yes, sure. Actually, I've worked with Matt for a few years now. The first change project we did was actually out of one of our sobering centers, and how we transferred clients over to our detox. In the past, it used to be where it was like a first come, first serve type of model. And we noticed that there was a huge opportunity to bring clients that were in more of a crisis to go over to the detox. And so I worked with the program managers and the staff. And so the first project actually was very successful. We changed the way that we brought clients over. And so, for example, if someone was detoxing from alcohol, we would conduct observations, of course, and withdrawal scales, and then they would be put in a priority to go over to detox. And so we saw huge success with that. And that was really great. Most recently, and this is the one I'm super excited and passionate about. I'm like an outcomes type of person. And so I love to see change, and I'm very results driven. And so most recently, we actually had a huge opportunity with an organization with medication errors. And when I first decided, okay, we're going to do a project to reduce medication errors, that's like a big chunk to bite. There's just so many factors. And so I decided to select one program that actually had a team that's very passionate, actually a fairly new team. So they didn't really have any bad habits. It's all about what we train them. And I thought, you know what? I would love to be able to conduct the project here and then hopefully implement it throughout the organization. With that being said, the difference in the NIATx projects and how I've grown through Matthew's help and consulting me is actually, before the NIATx projects, the mindset was like, this is a change we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to implement. And although this does happen in organizations, there could be policies or whatever, the change project, and I'm getting goosebumps as I'm talking about it right now, the change project this time was really implementing the staff, the ones that are client facing. They're the ones that are really going to tell you, hey, these are some opportunities. And so I was able to go ahead and partner with Matthew, and through a series of meetings with staff, we narrowed it down to three key staff that were going to be able to help us with this project. We had their buy-in, and they came up with really great ideas and really different ideas than I think I would have thought. Because again, as compliance is like, this is the rule, this is what we're going to implement, end of story. And they came up with a really good idea. Well, they had many ideas. And through the change project, we had to narrow it down to one that we were going to try. And we did, and we saw amazing results.
Yeah, I love the empowering the team that takes place with this. There's no one person who's going to come in and make this change. There's a process, and there's consulting, and there's coaching, and then there's you getting chosen to sort of guide the team with it. And then we empower staff. I mean, that's how you have to do these kinds of projects, because it's got to, as was mentioned earlier, become a culture.
I want to hear what that process is. That process excites me. I know you do too. And maybe Gina and Matt can chime in about that. But just to kind of zoom out and share with the viewers what the medication errors are that Gina's talking about. And in many residential treatment and detoxification or withdrawal management programs, there is the safe storage of medications. There's a function where you're storing these medications for clients. These are prescription medications oftentimes. And then making these medications available for the client. And in all of that, I think that happens maybe a few times a day across a 24-hour shift. Is that right, Gina? Maybe 3 times a day, every 8 hours or something like that? You guys do
Absolutely.
medication?
It's we you're absolutely correct. We go ahead and we store the medications for the clients, and basically, as Jamie mentioned, we hold it for them, and then we will go ahead and provide them access so that they're able to self-administer the medications. During this process, we do have the possibility where we could have all types of errors. We could have errors with paperwork errors. We could have incorrect counts. We could have where the client is taking an extra dose of medication, or maybe, they didn't get a dose. So there's a huge opportunity for numerous amount of errors.
And when you think about the number of clients that are in treatment at any given time, we have 30 guys in treatment at a program in Hayward. That's going to be about 42 people here soon. You've got 15 people in treatment at a detox program in San Mateo, maybe 12 to 15. You've got maybe 25 people in a detox environment in San Leandro. And when the majority of the clients have medications that need to be safely stored, documentation needs to be airtight, medication counts. Some of them have many medications, right? And our job is to keep their other chronic conditions that they may have stable via the provision of medications while they're in treatment with us concurrently. So then our medical directors, of course, see that as very important. They want to make sure that any potential symptoms that they may have regarding a certain condition, those are being managed. So when you think about 3 times a day, all of those clients in treatment, and then every client has a pretty good number of medications, there is a huge opportunity for error because, Matt was talking about earlier how these are human lives. Like these are not cogs in a machine. This is not a factory, And in process improvement, they talk about like your defect rate, like what's your error rate, and how many of the widgets that you're producing are of the sufficient quality that you're able to run with those and use them in your vehicles or whatever that's going to be. For us, when we don't follow the right recipe, for one, Gina's going to tell us how did she uncover a better recipe, but when we don't follow the right recipe, has major impacts on the client, not getting the right medication, getting extra medication, and things like that. So one of the things that keeps me up at night, and the NIATx friends remind us, if it doesn't keep the CEO up at night, it's probably not important enough that a certain change is actually going to get adopted, or things like that. That does rent space in my mind, because I think about people coming to us as being professional healthcare addiction treatment providers. We have a responsibility of making sure that they leave better when they're done with their treatment with us than when they came. And I no matter what we've tried, we've tried all sorts of different things over the last few years, but we couldn't really seem to get that medication error rate down, which meant that we weren't thinking about the problem correctly. It didn't mean that it's an insurmountable problem. It's impossible to solve. It just means that we needed to approach it in a different way, which is a great segue. Right, Jen?
That's a wonderful segue. I'm waiting. So go ahead, Gina. So if you could share with us sort of what was the process and how did it evolve? And what was that like?
Yes. Well, the process was like, as I mentioned this time, we were able to recruit staff to participate in this project. And it was more like they were selected, we had an LVN, we had a lead counselor, and then we had like a very high performance staff member. And so, again, we solicited many ideas from all of the staff, and we narrowed it down to one of the biggest errors, as I mentioned, was in documentation. And we have like a state log that we actually fill out, and then we have a med tracker. The log is what's actually writes all their medications. So even if a client, as Jamie said, they come in with a lot of medication, and oftentimes I think the smallest amount on average that a client may come in is probably 5 medications if we're lucky. And they can go up to 13 medications. Sometimes they're duplicated, sometimes they're mixed meds. So the whole process first is trying to figure out which medication are they going to be allowed to take while they're in our facility, or self-administer rather. And then after we figure that out, let's say that it narrows it down to like 6 medications, right? Then we have trackers that we have to list all the medications. So there's a lot of duplicate paperwork. And by the time you get to the 6th medication or 7th medication, their hands probably tired. Maybe they thought it was one medication, and there's a lot of error. And so that was definitely a huge opportunity. And one of the ideas that was very consistent with the staff was it would be nice if not only not doing the double work, but we would be able to fix document errors if there was some type of system where when we created the first state log, the DC 5078, if we could create a med tracker at the same time. So that way it would reduce the errors. We would know that if it was Tylenol medication that they're taking, that the med tracker would automatically print out the Tylenol and take the information. And so that was definitely one idea that was very consistent among staff. It would save time. When we have medication errors, especially document errors, let's say, Jen, that you're the one that fills in all of the documentation when the client first comes in. And then I come in and I'm going to allow the client to self-administer the medication. If there's a paperwork error, it takes a minute to go ahead and do research. And again, the client, they're going through withdrawal. They're detoxing. We want to be able to service them and give them their medication or allow them to self-administer their medication on time. That can take anywhere from like 10, 15, 20 minutes to figure out the error. So anyway,
Sure.
That was a huge opportunity. And we had another program. They had a system in place where they had the state form, and then they would create a tracker. The tracker was a little bit different because they're actually a sobering center. And so the tracker was created differently. And I was thinking, okay, let's take this and maybe just adjust it. It wasn't just creating the tracker. I want to say this, and I really want to stress this. We have staff that really care about the clients, and we care about the well-being, and we want to ensure that we are providing the quality of care to the clients, regardless if they have private insurance or if they're drug Medi-Cal or if they don't have any insurance. And with that being said, we went on and created the tracker. And although that was one of the first steps, we also ensured that we had teaching the staff how to use the tracker. And if we had errors, what were we going to do about that? We were going to retrain the staff and having them sign staff in-service logs and testing for understanding. So there was a whole process that we did instead of just training or creating the tracker as we did in another program. So that was definitely like what was the foundation of changing, our results over at that program.
Let me jump in real quick. Gina, thank you so much for painting that whole picture. I want to just zoom in real quickly on the tracker for those who may or may not understand what we're talking about. So am I correct that this is basically a document that says this client arrived with these medications and these are the rules for taking them. This is the prescription. This is how many were there. And then as they self-administer, the staff then checks off and changes the count on the track. Is that what we're talking about? Literally tracking like that? That's the tool?
Yes. So we have the med log, which is the California state med log, and that lists all of the client's medication. And let's say that they have 8 medications.
Yeah.
However, they may not take all 8. They may decide I only need 3. And of course, with doctor approval, your medical director approval, that's fine. The tracker is exactly what you said. So if you are self-administering a medication, it basically lists what is the medication? What is the dosage? How many milligrams? Who is the prescribing doctor? The expiration date? There's probably 12 little boxes that you have to check off. Okay. And yes, every time the client self-administers, we put down a time, how many, pills did they take or whatnot, and they sign it and we sign it. And the biggest, the biggest opportunity was in those 10 squares and matching the first document. Yes.
Absolutely. So this is a very detailed process, very critical and very detailed process. So how did we turn that corner?
So as I mentioned, we decided that we were going to go ahead and, implement this tracker. Of course, it's not just implementing it. There's constant training and coaching, and then monitoring our results. Like, how are we going to find out the results? I'd like to mention that the projects are not like, we're going to do this on Wednesday and then a week later, and then we're going to have results. This is like a whole several months. I want to say, right, and then you could jump into, I believe that we started maybe like at the end of January. It's usually like, the beginning of the year. We have several months where we're having meetings with the staff. We're doing survey monkeys. We're getting ideas. And this is like maybe once a week meeting. And then finally in May, we narrowed it down. This is what we're going to do. This is the process. And so we did a test run for maybe 2.5 weeks. And that's where we kind of came back and, maybe moved some things around. And then we went full force in June. And I wanted 1 full month to have all of the days. We did audits every single day. So what I mean by that is we would basically, every time the client took medication, we're double auditing the counts. And that's a lot of medications.
Sure.
I'd like to say in the beginning in January, when we first thought of this, we had like 55 errors in the month. And that's not even tracking the audits every single day. That was like 3 times a week.
Well, I love that this is on the radar and that this is something that just proactively got taken on with NIATx. Matt, what were some of your observations as you worked through this process with Horizon?
As you listen to Jamie and Gina describe the work, they really reflect the model in some very important ways, and that's why this was successful. The idea of executive sponsorship, having something that senior management cares about, that has an important business case that's important to quality, creating a strong change team, engaging the staff. This is not a top-down model. This is a model where we engage the workforce, as Gina was describing. We were also, one of our key tools is a walkthrough where we actually look at it from the customer's perspective and actually go through the process and see what it feels like, as both Jamie and Gina were referencing. We often will draw flow charts and pictures to try to understand what's happening. We did some of that work as well. And then Gina was also talking about brainstorming. We use nominal group technique brainstorming. And that's where we get these ideas from the staff. When she was talking about surveying, we surveyed people, we gather their ideas, we select an idea, and then we, after some review and dialogue, we decide what we're going to implement. And then we do those PDSA rapid cycle changes, as was the case here. And as Gina was describing, measuring it. It's a data-driven process, measuring it as you go and making corrections as you go. Sometimes you think that you'll experience a certain result. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you're surprised and something interesting or odd happens. And those are great learning opportunities where you can make a correction, make an adjustment, and continue to monitor that data across time to see what's happening. Both, as you said before, Jen, the quantitative data as well as the qualitative experiences of both the staff who are engaged in the project and the clients and customers who are receiving the benefit of whatever the improvement is. So all those things have been a part of this project, and that's why it's been successful. It really held tightly to those core NIATx principles in an excellent way.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thanks for both of you, Gina and Matt, for just really being clear about this being an iterative process, right? It's always moving upward, so we see the opportunity, we identify it, we identify what we have to do. I love this. I've got to look up the nominal group technique brainstorming. That's how I just jotted that down. I just love how that sounds.
Yeah, well, let's unpack that. I
Let's
thought that
do
was
it.
cool. That was a cool tool when I
yeah.
learned about that. But Matt, what is that? Why is this so important?
Yeah, tell me more.
So very often when people do brainstorming, one of the questions I always ask when I explore this is, how's brainstorming for you? Because if people are honest and feeling safe to be able to talk about it, they'll often say, I don't much like it because some people dominate the process or some people have more power and influence. And I tend to like to think about things before I come up with opinions. And by the time I'm ready to talk, everyone's already decided what they're doing. Brainstorming often is not very inclusive. So what we do with nominal group technique is to create some structure to the brainstorming to ensure that it is inclusive, because our agenda here is to make sure that we have a diverse group of people contributing to the process of generating ideas. We're looking for strategies, and we have to make sure we have a process that enables everyone to be a part of that. And so we have a simple sequence of steps where we have people silently generate ideas based on a simple question. They are not working together. They're working independently, coming up with their own ideas. And then we gather up those ideas. We round robin report them out. If we're sitting in a room, we go around the room and each person shares an idea, or we might use it asynchronously through a survey process where we report out the ideas. And the critical piece is that when we're reporting out ideas in step 2 and then in step 3, where we're clarifying, which is basically just making sure that everybody understands all of the ideas, the critical piece is that no one is allowed to make judgments of any of the ideas. No one is allowed to make comments about any of the ideas, because that ensures that everyone feels comfortable in sharing, and then they can share creative things that might not be popular or that might seem a little bit outside of the norm. But that's how we generate this really robust list, right? A wide array of ideas and a big volume of ideas. And then the 4th step is where we do voting, where we have a nice voting process where we ask people to select their favorite ideas. And then we have some dialogue around the voting to get us to an action item. And remembering that this is a rapid cycle model, we're not asking people to commit for 5 years to a certain something. We're saying we're committing to try this. We're committing to test this to see if it works. If it doesn't work, we'll stop doing it. So the stakes are not as high as sometimes people think they might be with the implementation of a new practice or a new policy. We'll try this and we'll see what happens. So that sequence really does a nice job of making sure that everybody's at the table and that they can be enthusiastic and excited about sharing their ideas with their group. The other thing that's happening here is that we're building team while we're doing this. All of these tools are really designed to enhance the relationships between team members. So if we're using these tools, we'll see that people will work better together. They'll be more efficient. They'll know each other. They'll trust each other in ways that they didn't before they used these tools.
That's just a brilliant way of helping to draw out those that are maybe a little quieter, maybe different personality traits where, they're not necessarily, willing to speak freely in meetings. Like they want to take a wait and see approach, collect all the information like you're talking about, Matt, before offering an informed opinion. And a lot of those more silent team members actually have some pretty cool insights. Everyone's just moving so fast sometimes that it's easy to just, overpower those individuals by doing some quick troubleshooting on the fly. And that's never the intention, right? But to add that, for us to have a structured process to draw all of the voices out equally is, I think, part of the magic of the process there.
Yeah, we often, the traditional model without structure plays toward the extroverts. Sometimes people think that the introverts don't have ideas. They have just as many ideas as the extroverts do, but we don't have a process often that creates the space for us to hear them. So in this way, we create the structure so that we make sure that everybody has a chance to share.
I love that. And I have to say that I know some of the folks that are quiet among us often do have some of the best ideas.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, where have you been? Speak
Right.
up.
Right.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I was reminded by the nominal group technique about one of these other factors that we thought was successfully kind of feeding into some good 30-minute monitoring stats that we were achieving at a detox program. And the idea came from one of the line staff. Like he wanted there to be a more efficient way of carrying a tablet around, and he ended up putting a lanyard on a tablet and just wearing the thing. And it seemed a little silly at first, but it really just conveyed ownership. Like, I am in charge of the rounds. I have the tablet on my body, and I will be marching around the facility and putting eyes on the client and entering, whether they're stable and stuff like that. And we were trying to dissect some of the success factors of this one program in terms of their monitoring stats. And we started to see that theme where it's like a lot of the processes that were in place were little tweaks that were made along the way by the people. And the manager just had really a nice ability of pulling those team members' insights together and just trying little improvements out. I don't know if she was actually consciously doing any of the NIATx stuff in her mind, but that was just her approach. And really want to celebrate Shanna for putting that in place at Cherry Hill Detox, who she's not with us anymore. Unfortunately, she passed away last year, but just really powerful. And so we thought, hey, let's consider adopting that at a different detox program and seeing whether that would actually improve the compliance rates of those monitorings.
And the generation of ideas from line staff, it's right out of those historical roots of quality improvement. When, for example, Japanese car manufacturing companies started to take a market share in this country that grew, and were really kind of clobbering the American manufacturers, much of the reason for that huge increase in market share had to do with the use of these exact tools that Jamie was just describing, of leadership going out to the factory floor and asking line workers to notice problems, of giving the line workers on an assembly line the power to stop that assembly line whenever they saw something that was problematic, and then to share that with their supervisors. At the same time, in the American car manufacturing plants, if the line workers stopped the assembly line, they probably got in trouble because they were slowing down the production.
Sure.
Now, eventually, the American companies started to adopt those principles, and then their quality started to go up. The irony there is that these principles all started here, and then were delivered to Japan by some American scientists and data experts after World War II, as the manufacturing industry in Japan was being reconstructed after the war. And so they implemented them far more than they were being implemented in the United States. Over time, everybody kind of saw the wisdom of these models and had pretty dramatic improvements as a result.
I wanted to mention a few things. First of all, Jamie, you and I are so in sync. This morning, I was thinking of the same thing, of how that person was so passionate about their observations, that they were wearing the tablet, I think, on the lanyard. And then we rolled that out, because they did not want to put that tablet down, and that passion. And what a great idea, again, from someone on the floor level, client facing, So first of all, I just want to say, I was thinking about that same thing this morning that I was going to mention. So how funny that you actually mentioned it. And then the second thing I wanted to mention too, like when I've done this project, meeting with Matt every week was very helpful because, I'm a compliance person at heart, right? I check boxes and I want to see outcomes. And one thing that he actually helped me realize is, especially as we were collecting data and collecting ideas and brainstorming, that it was okay for me maybe not to be in a meeting where they're able to discuss ideas or brainstorming. Because of my compliance hat, we felt that it would be best, I think on one meeting I didn't come in, just so that they would not feel intimidated or they would be able to speak freely. And I just want to mention I think that too is also very helpful, so that the staff feel comfortable and they feel heard and they can be more open about ideas. I think that was definitely a critical part in this project as well. And not having the compliance person there saying, oh no, I don't think that's going to work. Nah, so I definitely think that was huge. And I definitely wanted to mention that.
And we see the very strong parallel process between recovery work that is the core of what you're doing and the empowerment of your staff team. We're trying to empower people to take charge, to have a sense of agency and purpose and the capacity to make a difference and to have an influence. And so the values are aligned in a really strong way. And that's often what's helpful for organizations that are about recovery. As they start to adopt these models and the values related to them, they say, oh, this is what we do. Yeah, it is. It's exactly what we do. These values align with the mission that we have as an organization.
I do want to clarify one thing for our audience who may not understand what we've been talking about with the tablet and why somebody would put a tablet on their lanyard and walk around and own things. So I want to be really clear for folks who don't understand. We continue to, one of the things that I celebrate about Horizon and working here is that leadership really works diligently to empower all staff to take ownership of the work and to be accountable to the work and to make the work passable in a way that it can be executed properly throughout really stressful and, high stress situations, which is the name of the game in some of our programs, right? So we've implemented something called ObservSmart, which is a tablet that is, you want to go ahead and explain what that is really quickly, Gina, and then even more excitingly, get to the results of our change project?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Basically, we do 30-minute monitoring on clients. And a more effective way was to go ahead and use the ObservSmart system, which is actually a Bluetooth system. For example, the client comes in, we put like a little band, almost like an Apple Watch type of band on them, and the signal is Bluetooth to this tablet. And this way, we're able to not only have our integrity, as that's one of our core values, but we're also able to go ahead and put in data that we could print out later. For example, if we have any type of, visits, we can look at trends. And so anyway, let's say that you're in the community room and you're watching TV. I'm able to go ahead and stand within 3 feet and monitor your 30-minute observation. And, I'm able to go ahead and click a few buttons about where you are, what type of activity I see with you, and so forth. And then it documents data. And with that data, we're able to ensure that we are doing our 30-minute checks in real time. It's not where we are documenting everything on paper. And, I could say that I'm checking you at 2:30 and maybe it's really 3:00 and I've just put 2:30. The ObservSmart Bluetooth technology system keeps us honest. And so that's what that is. It also, alerts us if I believe it's 8 minutes before the observation is due, which is why people who are very passionate about that want to ensure that they have that tablet on them at all times, just as like a little reminder.
Yeah, and I love it because it has the clients, even their photo is up so that the individual wearing the tablet or bringing the tablet around knows who they're observing for sure. And it's just a really good accountability tool. So thank you for helping us explain that to folks. Tell us about the results of this change project.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, this is her favorite part. Here we go.
Man, I'm like a results-driven type of person. That's just how my mind is. So in the beginning, in January, we had like 55 medication errors. And again, that's not even counting medication every single day, or that's not even doing an audit. It was like 3 times a week. And so we probably had a lot more than that to begin with. I mentioned that there were several months, I think it was 3 months, that we were in the process of, gathering the team together. Who's going to be in the team? What ideas are we going to have? What are we going to focus on? And so we started our first run in May, and I believe it was like almost 3 weeks. And at that time, we went from 55 errors in January to 13 errors. For that 3-week period. We counted 246 medications. And so we had, a 5% error, which was really good compared to the 55 that we had in January. So we were feeling really good. We did make a few changes in the system as far as like how we were going ahead and auditing and what type of days we would audit. And so anyways, like how many clients had medications, I think like on the spreadsheet, we made some adjustments as well. And that's part of the project, right? This is where we make those tweaks. And so we knew June 1st through June 30th. Well, as it turned out in June, at the end of June, and I didn't want to share any results with anyone, we had weekly meetings with this program, and I purposely was very vague because I really wanted to share what great outcomes we've had. For that month of June, we had 568 medications that we counted that month. We did audits every single day. And audits is ensuring that we are going ahead, and if the med tracker says that Jen has 15 pills left in this bottle, that we're checking every single medication to make sure that the numbers are accurate. With that being said, for the 30 days, 568 medications that we audited every single day, we only had 4 errors. Did you hear that? 4 errors out of all that medication. Right. And I want to tell you, today is October. And as we are continuing, every month I have to do like a monthly recap of what kind of errors. And I can say, knock on wood, I don't know if you hear that, knocking on wood, but we have continued to have no more than 4 errors a month. And I'm super excited. This is clearly like I have goosebumps, as I'm talking about it. The NIATx project has really helped us help this program. And, we want to implement this going forward in other programs. And the coachings and the mentoring from our consultant, Matthew, has really helped me. This is, again, the second project, look at things in a different light and really understand the value of having the team who's client facing and the team who's really at, right there, and how we're able to listen to what their ideas are and drive the results we need. Because for how long were we looking at the errors and we thought, okay, they're just not doing this. And, to really take a seat back and listen to the staff I'm so happy. I'm so proud. And the thing is, they're proud of themselves because they did this, and we celebrated the team. And I think that that's also very impactful. It's not just something that was driven from the leadership, but they were really part of the team and, helped drive this change.
That is so
Well, so Jamie and I agree. We both almost said it at the same time, I think, just how powerful that is. I don't know if anybody in the audience could tell how excited Gina gets over the improvement results, which is wonderful. And Matt can attest to that one of the principles, the 5 principles for NIATx, is to choose a powerful change leader. Gina steps up and certainly has found a way to be empowered and empower others. And this process helped us to tackle a really important, improvement project, practically, lots of energy, team driven. I love the brainstorming technique that allows everybody to say their piece and sort of really come from their heart without having to maybe, say it out loud to everybody at the same time.
Jen, when you're talking about,
Yeah.
excuse me for interrupting, when you're talking about Gina as the powerful change leader, sometimes people misinterpret powerful as an indication of administrative position or for the
Yeah.
formal power. And you just articulated it perfectly, Jen, which is that it's much more about your connectedness to the team, the relationship, your influence, because you have a relationship and they trust you and you're connected to them and they're interested in, and they're motivated based upon your efforts to work with them to create the results. So that's the kind of power, as Gina's describing and displaying, that gets the job done.
No, I
And
really
just to
appreciate
chime
that.
in real fast, question: is knocking on wood a NIATx strategy, Matt, that you recommend?
We'll
to
test it.
make
We'll
sure
see
that
what kind of results we
Yeah.
get with a PDSA test,
we have to
and
do
then we'll
A and B
get back to
comparison,
you.
huh? Yeah.
That's right.
Don't get
We'll get
caught in
back
the
to you.
weeds. Just use rapid cycle testing, man.
Well, I have a question, since we have our pro on the call, Matt. Now that Gina has uncovered what we appear to be a better practice in terms of the process adjustment that she made with the team for medication handling, documentation, and all that, if you apply that at a different program, to what extent would you go through the whole series of best practices again in terms of sourcing ideas from the people and doing the walkthrough and all that stuff? If you know that the error rates are higher than they can be, and you've already uncovered what you think is maybe a best practice for your organization, and if the service line is similar enough, would you say it's safe enough just to implement it, but carefully in terms of change management?
Yeah, that's a really great question. To what degree do you need to engage in some adaptations? And I think you articulated the critical piece there, Jimmy, which is if it's similar enough. If it's an identical program, obviously no 2 programs are identical. They all have variables based on, there's even a same level of care in a similar environment serving a similar demographic will have variation. Staff is one of the key variations in terms of people's orientations, attitudes, perspectives related to these kinds of changes. So we have to take a look at all those distinctions and see if there is any adaptation that needs to be made. But in general, if it is a very similar environment, then you've done the work in one. So then one of the best ways to sustain something that works is to spread it to other services. To the degree that there's differences in between those services, then we may need to explore some of those earlier tools, but based on the foundation, right? We have a fast track now because we have a lot of knowledge and wisdom that's been gathered based upon what we've done already. So we're not starting at zero. We may or may not need to repeat some of those tools. For example, the nominal group technique that we were talking about earlier generates a list of strategies. I always guide and encourage people to keep the list. We selected one item from the list, but we've got a list of 37 items, and that list may come in handy for this same program's future changes or for other programs' potential changes. So that's just one example of the way we can incorporate what we've done in one location into activities in another location.
I think that's a great question Jamie has brought up, because actually I didn't think about it at first. I thought, you know what, this would be something that we could implement. But looking at the bigger picture, I think the key is the staff. For example, I I would feel that they would have to have the same type of buy-in, the same type of passion, maybe they have other ideas. So that's really interesting because I did not think about it until you mentioned it, because in my head I'm already like, yeah, we can implement this anywhere. The program that I did do the change, as Jamie said, has a little bit of a smaller census compared to the other program. So yeah, be very interesting.
This is one place where the team orientation and ensuring that it's not top down can be really critical. If we had the supervisor of the new program say, hey, they did something over there, we're going to do it over here, let's go, that would be one thing. On the other hand, if we had some of the counselors from the program where it was implemented talk to the counselors in the new program and say, hey, there's this cool thing that we've been doing, it's working really well, that's going to get us somewhere pretty quickly, because now we've got some peer-to-peer kind of engagement around something.
Yeah.
Sub that.
I love that too. And I love the idea that you brought up, Matt, of sort of upcycling the ideas that we didn't get to explore in the previous project, particularly in similar efforts. So thank you for that. Does anybody have anything that you think we should say that we haven't said before we close today? This has been a really interesting conversation, and I just have this sense that nothing is as overwhelming as it may seem at first if you have the proper framework, right, and process in place. So I'm really excited about this.
I would just say that change, although we're always trying to focus on simple things that we can implement, just because they're simple doesn't mean they're easy. It requires commitment. It requires consistent action. It requires that a number of things that we've been talking about are put into place across time. And I would just encourage you all to celebrate yourselves and to celebrate Horizon as an organization for the work that's been done and is continuing to be done. Frankly, I do a lot of work where there is that pretty dramatic drop off in terms of people's engagement with the model. So when I do have a chance to work with an organization who really connects to the material, connects to the model, and implements and has that nice takeoff, it's exciting for me, enjoyable for me, and I always just want to make sure that everybody hears about it. And I'm glad we're talking about it today, because what you've been doing is really good work, and it's what I would call exceptional work, because it's not the norm. You've really used the model in a way that's showing strong results and feels like it's built into your culture now.
I think I love what Gina said earlier about how cool it was to kind of open up idea generation with the staff members who just really had a passion for wanting to make a difference with this problem. Yeah, it reminded me of motivational interviewing, because I remember as a new counselor, I wanted to fix all of my clients and have all of the right answers. I wanted to have like the magic silver bullet, evidence-based, whatever. And then you realize it's not your job to do that. And actually that could be bad if you, if you do that. I remember going to a Mint workshops. There was a motivational interviewing network of trainers, 3-day workshop. And that's where the light bulb came on. I was like, oh my gosh, all I have to do is like create the environment and shape this up in a way for them to come up with their own answers. And like, I remember how freeing it was, because I didn't have to be the one to come in and try to fix things or have the answers for people. And they're more powerful. Like, when somebody's able to go through that exploration and come up with their own desires and reasons for changing and their approaches for changing and stuff like that, it's more likely to be able to stick when somebody does that for themselves, right? Rather than you coming in top down, a few layers removed from what's actually happening on the ground level and thinking that you're just going to architect some solution when you're missing some critical context behind what's actually happening there. Super freeing, and it's a win-win, as Jen said, in terms of empowering the staff members to take a hold of the problem and shape up a solution in the right way. So I have to say, this is what makes my job exciting. Gina, you presented some of your results at one of our executive team meetings a few months ago, And I just remember how excited everybody was for you. And, our people benefit from your enthusiasm and your passion and the NIATx Foundation's framework that you've adopted. So very nice job. And I think, Matthew, you said it correctly earlier that we just have to keep it going. It's really never done, right? So we'll be leaning on you for some additional consultation since we have had a little bit of turnover here over the last year. And so we'll probably keep training this out.
I was just going to say that definitely some learnings I've had throughout the last 2 years through the NIATx project is the tools are there. The charter is so helpful. It's like step-by-step play. And at times I have to go back and change it. That's one key thing is it was super helpful to have that step-by-step. It wasn't just in my head prior to a couple years ago. It was just like, we're leadership, we're going to implement this. This is what we're going to do. So it really helped my thought process completely, change. Secondly, I am so passionate. I'm definitely a hands-on type of person. I love working with the programs. I love being out at the programs and working with the teams and working with the clients. And it was so nice to go ahead and have such a good engagement with this team and their ideas, and to really take a step back and listen to what they were saying and not just create my own ideas. And I think that was the biggest thing, is just having the participation from the team and then celebrating and keeping them motivated, because again, this was like a 6-month project, right? It wasn't something that happened overnight. And I think Matthew has helped me be very patient and, understand that maybe we will have change, maybe we won't, maybe we'll have the results we want, and maybe we won't. And it was just very successful. And I am a big believer of the NIATx project, the charter. And I celebrate the wins, because at the end of the day, not only have I had personal growth and learned something, but at the end of the day, the clients are the ones that, reap the rewards.
That's what I was going to say too, Gina, is Matt, I just want to celebrate you and NIATx just for coming up with this model that incorporates empowering the staff. I think it's so critical. And, by empowering the staff, these things find their way better embedded into the culture of an organization like this. And once it's embedded in the culture and people have buy-in because they've been part of the process, then, the value in the client's life gets to shine. Please visit our website to learn more and to connect with us on social media. Our website is www.horizonservices.org.
Horizon Treatment Services, inspiring hope and healing since 1976.